I think we can start now because I don't see any other people joining, but if they come, they will find us when we have already started. So I'm going to introduce the speaker today, who is one of our own, who is also a WMI graduate scholar in Uganda, who has been so kind to agree to speak to us today. And I encourage you to, start writing down your questions. You can post them in the Q&A section. And once she's done with her presentation, which she'll be sharing shortly, then we can also tackle those questions. So today we are going to talk about community activism. And some of you might already be activists in your own communities. Others are looking forward to being activists. And today we are going to explore some of the ways you can become an activist, what it means to be an activist, what are some of the activities involved. So kindly stay with us and ask as many questions as you wish to our speaker, who is very much knowledgeable on the topic today. So I'm just going to read her bio. And of course, always you can reach out to her via WhatsApp. I hope she can also share with you guys her social media handles. And we'll see how that goes. So Jacqueline Alessi is a self-driven, committed young woman, openly living with HIV and passionate about working with young people living with HIV. She has contributed actively to the HIV response, both nationally, regionally, and also within local communities. She's an alumni of Wells Mountain Initiative, as we all know, a graduate scholar from Uganda, and she holds a bachelor's degree in social sciences, majoring in human rights, and she also has a diploma in guidance and counseling. So kindly help me to welcome the speaker today, who will dive into the issue and hold the discussion with us all today. And I hope you're coming with an open mind, ready to learn, ready to also share what you've learned in the past. So allow me to welcome the speaker to take it from there. So karibu Jackie.
Hi everyone, I hope I'll just open my video for just a few minutes to be able to say hello to you. This is Jacqueline. Nice, seeing or hearing from all of you. I'll be doing without a video because of connectivity, but I'll try as much as possible to connect where you still want to see the video and all that. Please feel free to ask questions in the chat box, and I'll be happy to respond to the questions. So allow me to just take off the video, and we go to audio directly, and also share with you my presentation. So once again, I want to welcome you. Thank you so much, everyone who has made it today. I feel so humbled that I'm going to be talking to most of you today on something that very many people wanted to learn about, and also, express on how to be community activists or community advocates. So when I was taking on this role, I realized that there are many things that we can talk about. But before you to decide whether you want to be a community activist, you need to understand what being an activist takes. And also, I will also want to help you understand, I will also want you to understand what it means to be a community advocate, which is something that is actually so much related to being an activist. So for me today, this is what I would want us to take home. What is here today? I want you to understand what advocacy is and what activism is. What are some of the examples of advocacy? Does advocacy always involve confrontation? Why am I bringing all this? I want all of you to understand that before you decide to become an activist, you need to make sure that you also understand some things that, you know, work when you become an activist. So these are some of the things. Why and when would you choose advocacy, or to become an advocate, or to become a serious, you know, activist in your area? And what are the best components of advocacy? So these are things that I want to talk to you today about. And please feel free to ask where you feel you've not really understood. But I'm going to make sure that I go as slow as possible so that everyone is on the same page like I am today. So for us to first go to first understand this whole thing, I want to, I don't know whether the questions that are coming in are for me or Juma. Am I loud and clear? Can everyone hear me?
Yes, you're loud and very clear.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry, let me just go back. So for you to understand, you know, the tool, you need, for you to become a community activist or a community advocate, you need to first understand the tool. So one of the things that I want you to first understand is what advocacy is and what activism is. So advocacy is an active promotion of a cause or a principle. So someone might think, oh, isn't that activism? We shall get there. Also, advocacy involves actions that lead to a selected goal. I want you to understand where we are going, because this is very important, especially when you're working with the community. Advocacy is one of the main possible strategies or ways to approach a problem. This is something that very many people would ask, okay, can't I just do activists, or can't I just shout and make it possible? Here we are talking about the possible strategies. Also, advocacy can be used as part of a community initiative nested in other components. Advocacy is not direct service. Advocacy does not necessarily involve confrontation or conflict. So these are things that we should take very keen, you should take note of as we are going ahead with this presentation. And then someone would want to know, how about activism? How is this different from activism? I'm very sure you all can see the presentation. So community activism is the means through which individuals or groups and organizations work together to bring about a specific, often radical changes in social, economical, environmental, and cultural policies and practices. This is where we can see a lot of, you know, politics coming in and especially when we're talking about activism. You see, this is when we talk about activism, people always bring about the political side of it, but it can also be something else. It shouldn't only be, activists shouldn't only be in politics. They can also be in our daily day to work as we work in our society or community. It's also the broad goal of community. The broad goal of a community is to enact social transformation that contributes directly to improving living condition, enhancing community environment, and eliminating health or social disparities. This is something that is not very different from the previous definition of activism that I was telling you about. That the moment we talk about activism, everyone directs it to politics. this is something I want us to understand today, that as we are talking about activism, it can be our advocacy that we are talking about. But sometimes we don't understand that we are doing activism, but we are saying we are doing advocacy. So this is where I want us to understand all these very clearly and very keenly. So community activists engage in collaborative, sustained actions focused on changing underlying structures or removing barriers. That's why they are saying they can be political, social, economical environment. This is what I was telling you about, and especially it also brings in the oppressive conditions. For example, in many countries right now, sorry to give an example, you see what is happening in Nigeria. There's that activism that has rose. There was what happened. These are all, you know, political, or there's something that are related to politics. But we can talk about activism in regard to our daily life. Activism is sometimes a direct service. Now, I want you to understand that advocacy is not a direct service, but activism is a direct service. So this is where I want us to really understand where, you know, where we are going. As we are talking about what we are doing in our community, I want you to understand today, what have I been doing? Have I been doing activism? Have I been doing advocacy? So this is where we are. This is why I've projected these two. But I want us to understand something more, so that we get to the, to understanding where we are as, you know, as scholars, as graduate scholars, and even for those of you who are working already, you need to understand, what am I doing in my community? So let us understand advocacy more. Speaking up for or acting on behalf of yourself or another person or a group of people. Personally, I work with people living with HIV. Sometimes when I speak, when I stand to speak, I may be speaking for myself, I may be speaking for other people living with HIV, or I might be even speaking for a group of people living with HIV, you know, and this is where advocacy is different. I don't know whether some of you had a scenario of some time back when countries didn't have ARVs, not only in my country, but, you know, some other African countries. ARVs, like there was talk of ARVs, and people stood up and they were shouting and making the whole noise, you know, to make it happen. Now, I want you to understand that that was not advocacy, that was activism. Because activism is about, you know, you stand and this cause is there and then, and it's done. While advocacy is a process, you know, you keep on pushing, but activism is, we are speaking about it now and it has to be done there and then. I hope I'm clear on that point. If you have a question, please feel free to write it down and we can talk about it more. Also, to give you another understanding of advocacy is giving a voice or allowing someone's voice to be heard on a particular issue of concern. Now, advocacy is a process, you know, it's more of trying to push things to work out in the favor of the group you are advocating for. However, activism, I want it now, and you will give it to me. You use all means to make it possible. While for advocacy, it is a process. In most cases, when some people ask me, who are you? Maybe at the end of the presentation, or even after we are chatting, you will tell me, am I an advocate or am I an activist? So that is a question I'm pushing forward to you, even in the middle of the presentation. Also, advocacy is a deliberate process of influencing those who make policy decisions, corporate behaviors, and others. This is something to do with, you know, there are very many, especially for those of you who work in health, there are things that come that are not favoring the work that you do. Would you do advocacy or will you do activism? Will you go on making noise or will you sit down and say, look here, we've understood that this is how things work, but this is what we want. That is what we need to understand at the end of the day. So, and also to understand advocacy, it is active support. especially the act of pleading or arguing for something on behalf of yourself or others. Now, that is not, for advocacy, it is about pleading. For activism, it's no, this is what I want, give it to me, by force or by not force. So we need to really understand, I am talking about this, that we have activists, and we have advocates. Why I'm emphasizing on this is because it's high time we started understanding who are we in our communities as we are trying to reach out to more people in our communities. So advocacy is about pleading. Sometimes pleading cannot work. That's why activists take it on another level and say, no, enough is enough. We can't plead. We want to go here. You are telling us to go to bend. For us, we can't bend. That is how you see the activists are always the most shouting, making it be heard by everyone. So that's where we are. I apologize for the background noise. I am home, it's a Saturday. So please forgive me for that background noise. So how is advocacy different from other types of strategy? It involves actions that lead to a selected goal. You come down and say, this is where the problem is. You come up with actions. For activism, yes, you come up with actions, but they're actions of to do it there and then. While for advocacy, you set goals, you start thinking, if we do this, can this work? If we write a paper, can this work? And also it usually involves getting government, an agency or private business to correct unfair or harmful situation. While for activism, it's about, please, not even please, this is what we want. You have to give it to us by force, or not, you have to give it to us. But for advocacy, it involves, you have to work together to make it happen. So it is not the same as direct service. I already told you, activists is like direct. I want this and you have to give it to me. It's a direct service. But for advocacy, it is not a direct service. You are doing it, to make sure that this is going to stay forever. Sometimes activism can make something stay forever, but sometimes it can harm more people. For advocacy, it cannot, it can harm some people, like in terms of we might lose life because of the slowness in making it happen. It can kill some people because, for example, if there is an issue of lack of treatment, would you need advocates? Would you need advocates or would you need activists? That is another question I want to confront, to send to you. Will you need advocates, for example, when you're having issues to do with treatment, people are not having medicines? Will you do activism or will you do advocacy? These are things that we need to understand. It may or may not involve confrontation. As I was telling you that in understanding, as we are trying to understand what it takes to be an advocate, we need also to understand what it means, what you need to, what you may need not to do and not to do. Of course, when you're working with a community, you need to first understand, what is my community target? What is it that I want to do with my community? If I go shouting, will they understand me? If I go down and sit with them, will they agree with me? These are things that you will need to really, really, really click on when we are talking, when we are working with a community. Especially all of us have different areas, we have lawyers with us, we have medical personnel, we have administrators. But why did I choose this specific topic? We need to understand that, you can be a community, asset in two ways. You can be an advocate or an activist. So that is why I'm trying as much as possible to elaborate these two, and you pick on what is it that I want to be. So what do you need for successful advocacy? Your cause needs to be right. You all understand when you want something to happen. I know there's something about me is I can speak about my cause, but sometimes I may fail to write it. So if you want something to work out, you need to combine the two. Speak about something, you need to write about it, because when you continue writing about it, sorry, okay, when you write about it, you are able to know that you know what I wrote is the right thing. So your cause needs to be the right one. Of course, even in activism, your cause can be the right one. But the question is it the right one at that particular time? That is where the second one comes in. Your group should have some power in numbers or in clout. Sometimes we try and say, okay, this is what we want to advocate for. Do we have people on our side? We have, as we go on, we're going to understand why when we're doing advocacy, or when we want to advocate for on behalf of ourselves or on behalf of other people, we need to have allies. So the question is, the understanding of this point is, when you want something to go further, you need to identify some powerful people in numbers. You need allies who can say, oh, we support this issue. Oh, this is something, yes, we can go on with. Sometimes activism, it is whether you have the numbers or don't have the numbers, the point has come, we want it done, period. But for advocacy, you need to learn to sit down and is it the right thing to do at that timing point? You need to know, do we have the allies? Do we have the people to work with? You should have thoroughly researched the issue, the position or the opposition, the climate of the opinion in the community. Now, this is where we also go wrong when we want to do something in the community. We want to do something because you've had a group of people talk about it without further research. So my fellows, or my fellow members, let's understand something, that as we are trying to come up with the points that we want to advocate for in our community, or actively involved in terms of activism, let's do research. We shouldn't just write something because it is passion, which is very okay, but you need to have data. People love data. People love to know, is this something that is real? This one time I was writing a paper, and actually not, it wasn't me. Someone sent a paper that we were supposed to work on it. When we went and researched on it, we realized that already someone had written about it. People research, but the thing is, you need to come out and say, this is the issue, and this is how we want it to work out in the community. So you should be skilled in using the tools available to you. Social media right now, we all know, COVID came, we're not sure whether it will go, but the thing is, everything has changed. Everything is digital, everything. In fact, it has made us miss our Dream Big conference, which is something very sad that we are missing our conference. But at the same time, we need to know that right now, everything that is working out are the available tools, and that is the media, that is the social media, that is, if you're not on social media, then where are you going to learn a powerful person in your community? Please learn to use the available means. That includes the media that's available. You should pick your strategy and the tactics carefully. Advocacy is not about shouting. It's about becoming very, very tactful. You pick the right thing and you pick your things well, so that you are able to bring out the point. When someone says, Jacqueline, speak, they're not going to get disappointed when you open, when you come up and then, I want to talk about this, people just chase you away. So let's be very careful when we are choosing what we want to advocate for, or what we want to actively talk about in our community. So this is what advocacy is not. So this is where I want us to understand very well that when I talk about advocacy, advocacy is not an outreach work. Please never go there and write a proposal and say, I want to do outreach work. and you say you're doing advocacy. No, that is not advocacy. That is actually, we're now doing general work of reaching out to people. Advocacy is not information, education, communication. It's not about launching public campaigns. That is activism. When you do an outreach work, when you do launching public campaign, that is all activism. But advocacy, I've told you in the beginning, is about, coming up with something very short and make it be hard. And this is activism. Actually, what you see that is not advocacy, it is activism. Informing the government about your work, that is not advocacy, that is activism. When you want them to understand, okay, now we want this to be done, we want this, that is activism. And also fundraising. Sometimes people think that fundraising is advocacy. You can't do advocacy and then you say you're doing advocacy. That is actually, you are pushing something that has not been yet done. And that is very, very good, but that is activism. So those are the 4 things that you need to know about activism. So as I try to also make you understand more examples, you join a group that helps build houses for the poor. That is wonderful, but it's not advocacy. It is actually a service. You organize to get a proportion of apartments, new development, designated as low as moderate income housing. That's advocacy. You spend your Saturdays helping sort out goods that at the recycling center. That is not advocacy. You hear that land used for recycling center is going to be closed down, and you band together with many others to get the city to preserve this site or find you a new one. One of you even think about blocking the bulldozers if necessary. That is advocacy. That is advocacy. So when is advocacy appropriate? When power agents, institutions, or a company needs to change but will not, you can do some advocacy. When nothing else will work, you can do advocacy and activism. Actually, now these ones actually, sorry, I missed a point. I was supposed to say, when does advocacy and activism work? All these that I've mentioned here can work both way. When power agents can work, when nothing else will work, when you know you have the capacity to carry it through. Other sections of this chapter can help you different. Like I was just trying to make you, understand that you can also try understand this way in many other ways. These ones are just for you to go with. They are not so much, there are things that I mentioned already. When you're doing advocacy, you need to understand the research which we talked about. You need to identify your opponents. That is what I also talked about, the allies. To put it together, make a master action plan that for activism, please take note, for activism, make a master action plan that lets you consider all aspects of your campaign at once so you can adjust different elements to fit. Include your mission and objectives, your allies, opponents, your targets and agents of change, your strategies and detailed action plan. So as we're trying to wind up, or when you look around for help, check into the groups that you normally, you might normally be against, that may be against with you. When you're doing this work, you never know who your enemy is. You might think your enemy is someone who is outside your work, but surprisingly, you might get shocked when your enemy is actually within your work. So as you try to figure out on how to do advocacy or activism, please check the groups that might normally be against you within or outside the work that you do. That's very important for you to take home. So does advocacy always involve confrontation? I would say no, but for activism, yes. So advocacy can be confrontational, but conflict is usually a bad place to start with. That is for advocacy. But for activism, confrontation is a yes, because it is only confrontation that makes activism work. But for advocacy, you need to sit down and you try and beg. That's why some people try as much as possible to go for being advocates. So good advocates know they must think very hard about any confrontation that is going to be necessary. So why and when would you choose advocacy? Advocacy is best kept for when routine work, such as gathering support for a cause. These are things that I was just telling you about, but I'll share this with you, with Nicole, and then she shares with all of you. So the best time to start planning for an advocacy is when direct experience or preliminary research shows that you can't achieve your goals in any other way. When you're sure you have, or you will have the capacity to carry it through. When you have enough authenticism and energy to last for what could be a long hour. So as I try to conclude, what are the best components of advocacy? Survival skills for advocates, understanding the issue, recognizing allies, identifying opponents and resistance, and then developing a plan for an advocacy. So what is our take-home message today? Advocacy is existing work. Just do it daily, but you can also do it in a better way. You get the pleasure of fighting the good fight, and sometimes the thrill of victory. Now, in most cases, when you're doing activism in your community, you may tend to feel you've given up. But there's one thing that's always that makes us not to give up. For those of us who work in the community, is that when we know what our cause is. So the pleasure of fighting a good fight is when you know you're going to get the victory. And that can really be the happiest joy when you know that today I have advocated, or I have made enough made the noise, the necessary noise for people living, they're going to get their salary. So in order to have that through, you need to get through all the day-to-day details and specifics. And you will need to keep an eye on the forest while working on the trees individually. I hope that is something that you will understand. I told you, as we are working, as you are choosing to either be an advocate or an activist, you have to know, who am I supposed to work with? That is why this last statement can be your quote of the day. You need to keep you need to keep also your eyes on the trees, because sometimes you want to keep the eyes on air. So with that said, I'm listening, and I'll be very happy to respond to any questions, and also be happy to take such members. I'm glad.
Thank you so much, Jackie. We seemed to have lost you towards the end, but we got quite a good amount of what you are saying. And I hope that the participants have learned something new, or it might be something that you already knew, but just that affirmation that you had it from someone else is satisfying. So I want to believe that we have questions for the speaker, and I would urge you or encourage you to use the Q&A feature to write the questions that you have, And one of the questions, Jackie, your talk was really interesting. Personally, I took home a lot of lessons, because usually people do confuse the difference between advocacy, lobbying, activism. There's a lot of terms that are interrelated but do not mean the same thing. So thank you for making that distinction. And how I wish that you would also talk a little bit about lobbying, because these are skills that in order for us to do the work we do, I think are very essential for any person involved in this type of work. So probably we'll move directly into the Q&A, and I see only one question. So I don't know if others just want to be given a chance to speak, or they would also go ahead to type, but we'll see about that. So the first question, Jeremiah, I think you joined a bit late, but Jackie, maybe for the sake of those who joined late, I see there's a question there asking you to differentiate between activism and advocacy, and how, and then how can we find the best of the two when faced with situations? So maybe you can just take a few moments to respond to that for those who joined a bit late. Jackie.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. I can see that is a question from Maureen. And also I see, honestly speaking, advocacy, activism, it depends on the way the three people understand them. But I want to give you a very, very, very simple difference between the three. However, one of them can work for two of them. For example, I told you advocacy is, you have this thing together. It's a group. You're an individual or a group, or your number of people who are speaking about an issue. Yes, that can also happen in activism. That can also happen in lobbying. However, what changes the three changes the three things. I don't know whether I'm clear. Can I be, because I see the network went off somehow, but Juma, am I on?
We seem to lose you sometimes, so, but now it...
Yeah, I keep on, yeah, I'm saying that, yes, the three things, I mean, they are all about making a point. I don't know whether it's a difference but because it's a similarity, actually, I would say, it is about something that connects them. The three of them is, there is this issue. We want to make a point. The way the point is made, that is how it differentiates whether it is advocacy, whether it is activism, or whether it is lobbying. So advocacy is, sometimes advocates have to sit, negotiate. Agree with me, that is how advocates work. If we have lawyers here, they can affirm to that, because they are also called advocates. But I don't want to talk about the advocates in lawyers. I mean, the lawyer way. I want to talk about our community advocates. If it is an issue, the advocates will sit down and want to make it, negotiate. Activists will say, no, this is what we want. It has to work. With or without it, we want it. Like, they use all measures to make it work. While for advocacy, it is, you sit and agree. Lobbying, it also can probably, lobbying is like you're negotiating. I don't know whether someone can understand me when I say, I want to negotiate. For example, I want to negotiate. You know, you want to negotiate on something, but sometimes also lobbying can end up to be activism. The only difference about the three is that is the way, the approach. The approach is what changes. You know, it's only the approach that changes everything. I don't know whether I've been very clear. I've tried to bring it in a very, you know, very, very simpler way. Yeah. There's something that Robert was asking. For advocacy to be successful, one has to support the cause publicly. How do you ensure our safety, especially in governments that don't support such a cause? I think this is a bit political, Robert, if I'm not mistaken. But I would want to say that, you know, sometimes not everyone will agree with what you're saying. Especially when there's somewhere I say that you need to identify the allies. You need to identify your allies. It's very, very important. The moment you might not have the majority of people supporting you in government, but there are those specific people who will understand your point. So you need to identify who is my ally. Like I concluded in my presentation and I said, as we look at the forest, the government is a big thing. It's like the forest, but there is that tree. There are those trees that we can pick and say, I can work with this tree. I can touch myself on this tree. And when a wind comes, I can be firmly sure that the wind will not take me. So as we are thinking about, you know, the forest, that's the government, there are those trees that we can hold on to make our point work. So it's the same thing, you know, when we're talking about advocacy or activism or lobbying, but I want us to understand that we need to identify who are allies. The moment you have your allies, there's a possibility of you winning. There's some countries who say the youths are allies. The moment they have touched themselves on the youths, they have seen things work. There are those who say the army, I'm just talking loudly, you know. There are those who say this, but you need to identify who is your ally to make the point be heard. Whether you're doing advocacy or activism or lobbying, you need to really make sure that you identify your ally. And you need to make sure that you have enough data. You know, the problem is sometimes you want to make a point, but when you don't have enough data or in terms of enough information about the issue to make the point. So you need to have, you know, you need to make sure that you have the points ready so that no one undermines your point when you want to make it be heard. I hope I've been very clear, Roberts and Maureen.
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. There's a question closely related to that. Gilbert is asking, he wants to know if it is advocacy or activism when one is fighting corruption in the country or in the society.
Okay, that is when you want to fight corruption. Obviously, that's one I want to say that you have to, that is activism. Because sometimes, you know, corruption, these are things that we are sure ending them is like, I don't know how many of you have ever put sugar in tea and you feel it's not enough. And then you try to put more sugar, you know, to make the taste work. So I would want to give that same example, that sometimes there's some things that you may think you're putting enough sugar to make it, you know, to taste good, but when honestly, the tea is not going to taste like the way you want it to taste. So corruption is something that sometimes you want to fight it in an advocacy way, You might find a way, you might find justice somewhere, somehow, but it might be very hard. So the best way, or if you want to fight corruption, is using the activist tactics, activist tactics. So when you use those ones, you can be able to achieve something. Sorry about the thing. I don't know whether that has been clear, but yeah, please, fighting corruption, activism is what works, or it is activism actually. Yeah.
Thank you again. So Elijah would like to know the steps involved in community activism.
Sorry?
So Elijah is asking,
Steps.
what are some of the, yes,
the
involved
steps.
in community activism? Yeah.
Okay, maybe if I just go back to my presentation, I don't know whether you can see it. Okay, let's just hold on. Can you? Okay, did I remove it? Okay, let me just go back to my presentation briefly and show you one part that can work out for all of us. The last one. Please just forgive me. Okay, it's here. Sorry, there. So can you see? I'm sure you can see that. So just like advocacy, these are the best steps you can take to do activism. Are almost the same. The components are the same. So these are some of the things that that can work both for you when you want to do activism and when you want to do advocacy. So the first thing is you need to find survival skills. You know, when something doesn't work, do you have a plan B? Sometimes people come when they know that is the only plan they have. No plan B, just plan A. I want this and you have to give it to me. If you don't give it to me, then. But in community activism or advocacy, you need to make sure that you have survival skills. You need to understand the issue. It's very important. Those are steps for you. You know, you just don't need to just come and say, hey, I have a point, please hear me out. You need to first understand the issue before you bring it out, before you sell it out. The other thing I was emphasizing is recognizing the allies. It's very important. And the third thing is identifying opponents and resistance. Okay, it's very important. And the last one is you need a plan. Those are also components that work for community activism. So I think I've been able to answer that for my friend Elijah.
Thank you. There's two questions actually. Jeremiah is asking if there's any relationship between alternative journalism and activism, or if there's a line between journalism and activism. So basically, what is the relationship between the two?
Wow. So I'm trying to figure out, you know, I'm not a journalist. That's why I put a question in front of everyone where I said, by the end of this presentation, I want members to also tell me whether I'm an advocate or an activist. So when it comes to journalism, I would want to say, you know, journalists are put in a special category that, you know, all countries respect. I don't know whether most of your countries respect the journalists. So the relationship is that, you know, when you have, there is actually a relationship. It can be good relationship and it can be bad, you know, sometimes it can be good or bad. So the relationship between the two is both of them present an issue. But what makes it different is how it is presented. A journalist will put it on media. Like I told you, if you want to make a point, or if you want to be an advocate or an activist in your community, you need to first make sure that you identify things that can work out for you. And media is one of them. So what a journalist or journalist will do, he or she will use the minimal, the possible means to make his or her point heard. However, for an activist, use the possible means, but is not sure whether it can even air on any of the medias. So the two have a relationship because both of them need each other. What only changes is how the journalists do it and how the activists do it. Do you know that a person can be a journalist when he's also an activist? But do you know that someone can be an activist when he's not a journalist? So these are things that we need to really get to the point of that. So let's be very, 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 very slow on some things, especially when you're a journalist, you can be an activist. But when you're an activist, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can be a journalist. Don't report on everything. You're an activist, you know. Don't report on everything that sometimes can even make you have questions when you don't have answers. So you need to be careful when you're responding to some of the issues that come into your community. Just choose your point right, you know. Have enough data. Yeah.
Thank
I
you,
don't know
Jackie.
whether Jeremiah, have I been clear? I see you say, okay, thank you.
Thanks. So we only have 5 minutes to go. I would like you to take the last 2 questions, and then you can make your concluding remarks. And of course, for those of us who had questions but had not been answered, you could reach Jackie later on in her phone number or WhatsApp. I hope she can be able to share that with us. Ahmed is asking, can an individual be an advocate and activist at the same time? And then when we say that activism uses any method in order to achieve a common goal, what is the limit on those methods? What if some people will suffer for the greater good? And when are the means enough to justify the end?
Okay, thank you. Don't remove the questions because I can see them here, Juma. So I will first go with Hamed Khan, where you're saying, can an individual be an advocate and activist at the same time? Yes and no. Why am I saying those two? Because sometimes if you become too much of an activist, the advocacy in you can disappear. You know, the question would have been, when do you notice that you have become an activist? When you've been an advocate? Because sometimes people think that when they start talking on behalf of others, they have become activists. No, not that everyone who talks on your behalf, or not everyone who speaks on a group of others has become an activist. Sometimes they have a point, but they don't have the information. I want us to take something today, is that as we are thinking of either becoming an advocate or an activist, have your data there, so that when someone approaches you, you have the data. You know, you shouldn't be like a wave, you know, that comes and then you say, yeah, I want to support this because everyone is supporting it. So advocacy, I mean, an advocate, you need to, you know, to ensure that you have your enough data. The same thing with activism. You need to make sure that you have your data right. You have what it takes to be sure, if in case someone asks you, why are you supporting this? You have the best answer. you're not sure whether you're answering that question or you're not sure. You need to make sure that you have enough information to support your information that you've risen, or your point that you're raising, or your issue that you're bringing on board. I hope that is clear. I've said yes and no. It can work both ways, but the most important thing is you need to first identify, is this issue worthy for me to become an advocate or an activist? Because we don't want you at the end of the day getting a 0 or even losing your life because you are advocating for something, or you are fighting for something that is not going to work. Make sure you have the right information for anything that you want to fight for or what you want to raise. So Mohammed, you made a very, very good point. What's the limit of those methods is making sure that you have the right people, that who are your allies. I want us to have a take-home message that allies matter when you, whether you want to become an advocate or an activist, you need to have allies. You need to have allies. So it can only work when you have the right allies. And what if some people will suffer at the greater, for the greater good? What are the means enough to justify this at the end? Like I said, let's just make sure we have our allies. You have the right people with you. They might not be the right, but they understand what you are fighting for. Sometimes it is good thing that everyone joins, but at the end of the day, you find yourself off the road when you're alone. We don't want you to be alone on something that you think is right. Have the right information, have the right people, have the people that you trust that can stand with you throughout, and then you'll see the difference of that means you not hurt more people. So try to to make sure that you have enough of what it takes, that in case something goes wrong, you're able to fight, to continue fighting, to see that what you've been fighting for happens. So it's a matter of having the right allies and also having enough data for you. I don't know whether, Muhammad, I have been able to answer your question. Chuma, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. I see that we have already exhausted our time, but thank you so much. I think you are awesome, and hopefully that we have taken some lessons home. For me, it's about evidence. We need to have evidence to present. And so even when you're dealing with political leaders, if you have clear data and stories to verify your message, then I don't think they would harm you or trying to hunt you or something. But thank you so much. I would give you a minute max to just say your concluding remarks, and then we'll call it a day. Jackie.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Yeah.
Jackie, we can't hear you.
Thank you very much, everyone who joined. I am very happy that you all were more in. I share. Can you hear me now? Hello.
No, we can't hear you. No, not yet.
Hello?
Yes, now we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Not yet, but you can hear me. You're responding. Okay, so
Yeah,
let me try remove the earphones.
yeah, we
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Well, I think Jackie has left, but it was a good session, and I'm sure that we have taken some lessons home. And of course, if you need to get in touch with Jackie, her number is in the general WhatsApp group. Please, she had requested that you can feel free to reach out to her with any other questions that you might have. And with that, I think we have come to the end of today's webinar. Nicole will send a post webinar survey. Kindly make sure that you fill that in, because we would need that feedback to improve on our next sessions. Thank you and have a good day.